Thank you, everyone, for joining me today. I'm very, very blessed to have as my guest Father Donald Calloway. He is a vocations director for the Marians of the Immaculate Conception in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. Thank you for joining me, Father.
Oh, thank you, Joseph. I'm honored, man. It's good to be with you. I see your name out there. I see things that you write and you post, and when you contacted me, I said, "Oh, I'd love to do this."
Thank you. I have a list, Father, of people that I would really love to interview, like, Archbishop Vigano, Cardinal Burke, Athanasius Schneider, and you're on that list, so no pressure.
Wow, I made the
Um,
cut.
yeah. I have to make a confession. When I heard about this book, my first thought was, Father Calloway is a good guy. I love St. Joseph. I have a great devotion to him. But I thought, and I sort of consider myself sort of a amateur, expert in Josephology. So I kind of thought, I'm going to read the book. I'm going to do the consecration, but there's really nothing I can learn in here that's new. I know, pretty much everything there is to know about St. Joseph. And, my relationship with him is already pretty intense. I don't think it's going to grow. Well, I was wrong. So, I learned, I was amazed because I learned new things in here. And if about St. Joseph, and if you talked about things in here that I had already known, you gave it a different, you explained it in a different way. And also, I have to say my relationship with St. Joseph grew I didn't think it could get any deeper or more intense, but it
Wow,
did because of this book. So I really recommend it.
that's awesome. Oh, that makes me so happy as an author of a book, and people tell me that. That's fantastic. And by the way, I'm jealous that you're actually named Joseph. By the way, yeah, I wish I had that in my name somewhere, but I don't. So I'm jealous.
I have to say that Father, when I read about this in my book too, is that as a child, I really loathed the name Joseph, and I really hated Saint Joseph. God forbid. I'm sorry. Um, and this is going to be what our discussion is going to be about. Saint Joseph was such a strong and manly representation, I think, of everything that I hated, but that I secretly wanted, which was, relationship with men, specifically my father.
Mm.
So yeah, this is the topic of our discussion, which is going to be Saint Joseph and homosexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I just want to start probably by reading just a couple of lines. I have to say, let me say first of all, that weaving through this book, which I saw, was I would say was the issue of fatherlessness
Mm.
and the trauma that causes. And I don't know if that was intentional,
Mm.
Father, but I saw it going through the book. Not like strong, not like you were
Sure.
like pounding that point, but I saw it. It kept reappearing.
Yeah, no, that was intentional.
Okay.
And yeah, I didn't want to turn it into like a sociological survey, but I wanted to get that point in where I could in the appropriate places. And yeah, you're not the first one to tell me that. Other people have picked up on that as well.
This is a great, I mean, the book is eminently quotable, but this is a great line. You're talking about St. Joseph, and this is at the very beginning of the book. You wrote, "He will help men be holy and chivalrous again. All men discover in St. Joseph a model of strength, fidelity, heroism, and virtue. If men, husbands, fathers, priests, and bishops follow the example of St. Joseph, families will be loving and secure, husbands will be holy, priests will be dragon slayers, and bishops will again be shepherds of souls and pillars of truth." Wow. So true, so true, so true. There's so much, I think, within St. Joseph that men can find, you know, such a great example. Especially, I wish, like you put here, that the priests, clergy, bishops
Yeah.
would follow him as an example.
Oh no, absolutely. That's why I think now is the time of St. Joseph, because we do have this crisis in fatherhood and in manhood, and it manifests itself in all kinds of different ways, whether that's a man being a workaholic, whether it's him being just a rabid heterosexual, right, where he's just out to score, with the ladies. That's obviously wrong. Or it can go in the other direction, where a guy, goes down the path of that lifestyle, of a homosexual lifestyle. That's obviously wrong as well. And I mean, we're seeing this manifested more and more today. And the sad thing is, a lot of this stuff has crept into the church, so that now we get a lot of the leaders of the church who are just very non-masculine. They seem to almost be emasculated. They seem to be not, really calling out the wolves and the dangers that are attacking the flock. And this is a big problem. This is a very big problem. And so that's why I think we've got to bring in the model of masculinity here, after Jesus Christ, of course. Jesus is always first.
Yeah.
And that's why I thought, boy, if we ever needed St. Joseph, now's the time,
It's true. This was another great quote from the book. And you wrote, "Today, calling a man the head of the family is frowned upon. God is not worried about political correctness, however." And then you wrote, "Why are many people offended by such terminology today?" And this is what I just talked about briefly. Yeah. "Sadly, it often stems from having been emotionally, physical, or sexually abused by a father figure."
Mm.
Father,
Yeah.
Father, this is an issue that nobody wants to talk about. When I read it in your book, you kind of encapsulated, my whole tortured journey from childhood to St. Joseph. So much of what I was looking for, was a father figure, but I kept getting abused and betrayed by people who I trusted.
Yeah.
So I haven't really heard anybody talk about that. And Father, just to I just want to attach something to that conversation. If bear with me here. Now we're talking about homosexual men, and there's been multiple studies that have been conducted by psychologists, and they've shown that males who are homosexuals tend to be neglected emotionally by their fathers and receive less affection than their heterosexual counterparts. Here's another study. Several childhood factors are reported to be associated with the homosexual orientation in men, including gender nonconformity and rejection by parents and peers. Gender nonconformity was significantly associated with paternal, not maternal, rejection.
Yeah.
Here's the really scary one. 46% of homosexual men, in contrast to 7% of heterosexual men, reported an incident of homosexual molestation.
Yeah. That's the facts, and the fruit of that is, of a woundedness, that when you get into those years of, when your hormones are flowing and you're looking for affection, you're looking for affirmation. Everybody wants to be loved. When you have those kind of experiences, it leads you to go in a direction where you're going to receive that love easily, readily, and oftentimes down a bad path, whether that is, a homosexual way or even a heterosexual way. I see this oftentimes with young ladies, for example, when they don't get that affection from their father, they're still craving for that affection. And sometimes they'll just throw themselves out there and make themselves available to any man who will tell them that they're beautiful. We all want to be affirmed. We all want to be loved. And when you have those wounds happen in those formative years, the fruits of that can be devastating, very devastating.
But it's interesting that you connected those incidents of trauma in people, and it's a simultaneous reaction. It's a rejection of the father, and that's security, but it's also a longing for it. And I see this a lot of times in gay men where they have a very visceral reaction against the Catholic Church.
Mm.
And I think that has to do with, just the priesthood and fatherhood, God the Father, and I think subliminally Saint Joseph, because I think traditionally there are a lot of strong masculine models within Catholicism.
Uh-huh.
But like you said, it's been emasculized.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think like part of what my experience has been in being a priest now for 17 years is that those who struggle with their own identity as far as their sexuality, or are just dealing with a lot of those kind of wounds, abusive wounds in that particular area, my experience has been that they are inimical, meaning they're enemy-like towards others when they see it expressed. Like that's why I think in the world today, when we see a man, or when many people see a man acting in a very masculine way, in a very strong way, in a leadership way, we call it toxic masculinity, right?
Yes.
Or that's what the culture calls it. And yet, they're repulsed by it because they're acting out of a wound, they're thinking out of a wound. And yet, at the same time, I think as you referred to at the beginning, they're still drawn to it in some way, because I think we're just hardwired that way. We long for that,
Yeah.
and yet if we've been wounded by it, we see it as the enemy, and yet we're still drawn to it because we can't run from our own being, how we're made by God. So that's almost the double life or double whatever going on with inside a person, that which you don't like, you're also drawn to. It's just like was it Herod and John the Baptist, right? So he was fascinated. He liked to hear him preach. He liked to hear what he said. He was drawn to it, but he wanted to kill him at the same time.
Right.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. Sadly, what is preserved especially in gay male culture, is this idolization of masculinity.
Mm.
And I think the more that culture, the secular culture, demonizes masculinity, the more I think young men will be drawn towards what homosexuality represents. It's a false idea of masculinity, but outwardly it looks like it. It looks like it. Sadly, I didn't, when I was young, Father, and I was sort of grasping because I was somewhat alienated from my father. I was very alienated from my peers, and I could, hindsight's 2020. I could look back and I could see myself grasping at something that I thought was masculine. I saw it sort of in the church, but then it turned on me. And I think young men, if they saw examples of healthy masculinity within the church, they would connect to it. Now, thankfully, because of priests like you, at least there are some shining lights now. When I was a kid in the 70s and the 80s, I'm sorry, there wasn't much.
Yeah.
Father.
Well, what you're saying is true, because, as the vocation director for my community, I meet a lot of men. I talk to a lot of guys and their discernment. And oftentimes, very often actually, outside of the orthodoxy of my community, right? So we're not doing anything weird when it comes to theology or spirituality or any of those issues, liturgically or anything. But there's also the strong draw of these men come and visit us, and they see guys, that are not, like hyper masculine in the sense of we're, some ogre that's, overbearing or anything, but they see real guys, but also guys who have that sensitivity, who are devotional, pious, and love, in a way that's extraordinary, but at the same time are real men, and they're really drawn to that. And they're like, I feel comfortable here because you guys are, you're dudes, you're really like, you're what I want to be like.
You're authentic, and it's a brotherhood.
Yeah.
It's a brotherhood of men. I think men long for that.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that's why young men nowadays gravitate, and I've seen it in my own family, gravitate towards these groups of guys who get into video games, and they're, dragon slaying and all this stuff. It's all artificial and
Right.
crazy, and it can get very sick. But I mean, they're drawn towards that
Yeah.
because there's a vacuum in the culture.
Correct. That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And in talking to people, I've seen that as well. Is guys, all guys on some level, no matter what their wounds are, they do want that sense of community, of fellowship. I mean, it's why we're drawn to those kind of conversations. We want to hang out with other guys and express ourselves in those ways. And I think, like, with this whole attack on masculinity and on fatherhood, it's also an attack on brotherhood.
Yeah.
The devil he doesn't want fellowship. He doesn't want brothers strengthening one another and being there, having each other's back. The devil doesn't want them to know that we're in a war and they do need to look out for each other. That's another tactic of the devil, is to break down the brotherhood. And when that happens, I mean, that's a tragedy.
Yeah. One place where the possibility of a sort of masculine initiation survived in the Catholic Church was in male altar servers, altar boys. When I was an altar boy, I was just sort of in between that time when altar boys were strictly male, and then it flipped, and then it became boys and girls, and it became, I would say, in the parishes I've been familiar with, it became mainly dominated by women and girls. So, I mean, I had that small opportunity of chance where I was under sort of the tutelage of a very good masculine priest who incidentally was rather physically slight and tiny, but he had that force about him to command,
Sure.
But then it started changing, and there was a lot of female Eucharist ministers and lectors, and then they brought in the girl altar servers, and then it ended.
Yeah.
So even that within the Catholic Church is gone.
Yeah, and these are not insignificant things, by the way, because when you allow certain practices to become the norm, guys by their nature, they want to be around other guys, not because, we think that girls are icky and we don't want to have anything to do with them. It's just guys tend to do things in a different way. And once the girls take over, guys just tend to step back. And they tend not to want to get involved because they don't want to be seen by their peers oftentimes as just hanging out with the girls, or the guys are going to start, thinking, well, he's like a girl, So when a lot of these practices creep in, the anthropological aspects of it get broken down, and people start to say, well, it really doesn't matter. Well, okay, on one level, okay. But at the same time, it actually does. What's being portrayed actually does matter, because, when a boy is in the sanctuary, he feels that leadership role. And what kind of leadership role is it? Is it an ogre kind of? No, it's servant leadership. He's there to serve the people. And so when that aspect gets taken out, when a boy just feels, well, the girls can do the same thing, and they're actually prettier than I am, well, we'll just let them do it. But that's not the point. And this is why, for me, it goes back to Joseph again. So, for example, in the Holy Family, and I've been telling this to people, Joseph was the least holy person in that house. Now, Jesus is God, flawless, he's divine.
Yeah.
Mary is immaculate. Though a creature, she's perfect. But whose role was it within that house to have the leadership role? Joseph. He's the one who initiated the prayers for the family. He's the one who initiated taking them to the temple in Jerusalem, to the synagogue there in Nazareth, and any other forms of worship. It was his role. He didn't have to be the holiest member.
No.
He didn't have to be the one, who was immaculate or divine. And yet the divine one, Jesus, and the immaculate one submitted to his authority because they were confident in it, because it was a sacrificial leadership. It was a servant leadership.
Amen.
And the sad reality is that today, when people hear that a man is the head of the home, they get triggered. They're like, oh, wait a minute, this is, oh, yeah. And oftentimes,
chauvinism.
Yeah, exactly. And they think, this means that I'm a second-class citizen. Honey, no, it doesn't. Actually, it means you're so worthy of being served that he's going to do everything he can so that you can be happy. And if that hasn't been your experience, well, that's sad. And oftentimes that is the case. And that's why many people do get triggered by it, because they've been wounded by that authority. And a bad example of a husband or a father. But we've got to recover it. We can't just jettison it. We can't just ditch it. That's why we've got to get back to St. Joseph, the model here. Without this, we're completely lost.
Father, as I don't know if you'd agree with this, but Father, as I think the family has gone by the wayside, I think so has everything else. And I think fathers have abdicated their responsibility a lot of times. I mean, if they're in the family, because we've got to remember half of families are divorced. So if dad is there, full time, physically, I think he's given a lot over to women. And that's not saying anything against like the power mom or the soccer mom, because I think women have had to fill in where dads have checked out.
Yeah.
And I think that's reflected in the priesthood, present company accepted, where I think specifically parish priest has like, okay, I'm going to let the female, Eucharist ministry boards run everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to show up when I have to be there for mass.
Right.
And that's where I am.
Yeah, no, you're right. And what's happening in the secular is also happening in the ecclesial, just in a different way. So, many men just kind of give up and allow the ladies to do the work. And it's not that they're not going to do a good job or it's not going to be done efficiently or whatever. That's not the point. The point is you have a role to play, and it's an important one, whether you're a biological father or a spiritual father. When you abdicate that, when you give that up, then you lose your identity, and you begin to not even show up, and like you said, so you just show up for when you're needed for the 40 minutes on Sundays to have your mass. But other than that, you're kind of absent. You're not there for your children. You're not there for your spouse, the church. And that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing. But it goes both ways too, because my experience has also been this, is that, oftentimes people want to come in and kind of take over father's job, and they want to, really run the show, and that's not good either, because, imagine if in a family, it was the children who began to say, well, we're going to run this house. Okay.
That happens a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Well, especially today. I mean, look at sitcoms today. All parents in sitcoms look like buffoons, especially the father. It's the children who insult their parents, and it's the children who seem to have the brains and to know how life functions, and the parents just look like idiots. That's how it's presented today in almost every television show. And it's the same thing happening in the church in many instances, sometimes intentionally, sometimes with good intentions, but bad results, because don't emasculate father. Don't take away his role. Okay, if communion takes a little bit longer, what's the rush? You know what I mean? Where are you going to go? So we've got to, and only the prayerful person is going to see through this and see that it's not an injustice, that you can't be everywhere that Father is and doing everything that Father does. Know your place, fulfill your God-given role, and you'll be holy and virtuous. But if you try and take over somebody else's place and their God-given role, you're usurping something that's not yours.
Well, a lot of parents want, and Father, I've never been married and I don't have kids, but a lot of this experience I have is anecdotal with friends, but also just outreaching and having so many people contact me and talk to me, and me as a son trying to help them. But I think a lot of parents, especially with the LGBT issue, a lot of parents want to be a friend to their kid, And I think a lot of priests want to be a friend to their parishioner. You know, I don't want my priest to be a friend. I want him to be a father, and I
Right.
want my dad to be my father.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. So
Oh, brother, you said it. As a priest, I experience this all the time because I can be having the most delightful conversation with someone at a Catholic conference. You know, and a lot of times at these conferences, you assume that everybody's on the same page here, you know. Not necessarily, because you can be talking about deep theological, things, and then somebody in a conversation will say, well, we have to be compassionate and understanding and very merciful. We're all wounded, but homosexual acts, for example, are intrinsically disordered. And then all of a sudden, kaboom! And then it always happens. Always. That individual says, my son is a homosexual.
yes, of
Or,
course.
and then it's like, so you've allowed.
It's usually a mom.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you're allowing your feelings and that relationship to override reason and truth. And they automatically think that you're a hater. I'm like, I don't hate anybody. I'm not a homophobe. I don't desire anybody to be harmed or hurt or anything. But I have to say the truth. And I say it with love and compassion.
Of course.
But as soon as you bring that up sometimes, it's, well, you don't understand. And this is my son. I love my son. I will never stop loving my son. I'm like, I'm not saying you don't.
No.
He needs you now more than ever.
Exactly.
Pour all the loving on him you possibly can. But remain in the truth of it with great compassion, with great mercy, and all of that. We're all wounded. We're all carrying a cross of some kind. But don't allow, your lack of understanding here, because you're actually not going to be helping your son by, giving in, or by saying, well, you and your partner can stay at my house overnight. I understand. The church is mean and nasty, but I understand. No, honey, actually you don't. You're making a big mistake, So, I could tell you so many stories, brother.
Oh, Father, I know. Father, parents with a gay kid don't want to be the father of the prodigal son. Now, my dad, God bless him, he's passed away.
Yeah.
He was tough, and he didn't have finesse. My dad was Italian, and an immigrant. So my dad was raised that way, I think, fairly stern.
Yeah.
And that's just the way my dad had a great devotion to Saint Joseph. Incredible. In a lot of ways, my dad was a lot like Saint Joseph, strong, good provider, very fast, very stout, very committed to his family.
Yeah.
But I think my dad had some issues with relating, especially to his son.
Yeah.
And but my dad at one point did give me the truth, and I didn't take it well. But that truth was, I would say, just the speck of purity that kept me alive, I think. And it's what I came home to. And you talk about this, I want to talk about it in the book. But and I had priests in my life who were that way, that really told me the truth. I don't think, they wanted what was best for me. But if I walked away, that was my decision.
Sure. Yeah. And I think you said a word at the beginning that is a good one. Finesse. Because, for example, I've made mistakes myself. Like I sometimes can just say things without, if I'm not prepared, and I find myself all of a sudden in a situation or a conversation with someone that I disagree with, that they disagree with me on this particular issue, sometimes I don't myself have the greatest finesse, or I don't say it the way that I wanted to say it. And so I think it's important in those situations, because I think that happens in life in general, whatever the topic is. But in this one in particular, because it's a sensitive topic, is there has to be room for people like myself as a priest, or even as a parent, if they say something that's truthful, but maybe not with great love, or they have to be willing to say, you know what, our conversation yesterday, I'm sorry. I mean, with what I was saying, I believe in that, and I'm not going to change on that. But the way that I said it, or if I wasn't understanding enough, I'm sorry for that. I didn't mean that way. You know, I really didn't. I think that's good for us to acknowledge our own inability sometimes to convey it, to convey the truth in a way that is loving, or you know what I'm getting at there? It has to be done, because sometimes people can say the truth. You know, somebody told me one time, there's two ways to hand somebody a brick. You can hand it to them, or you can throw it at them, right? Well, it's good not to throw it at them. You know, it's still a brick. But sometimes I think we need to be willing to acknowledge if we haven't said it in the best way. True.
Yeah. Father,
Don't come. You got to say things with love.
yeah, I think you're probably the worst judge of yourself. But because the LGBT issue connects with identity, it's very difficult to broach. So
Yeah.
it's I think no matter how you do it, and I don't think no matter the intentions behind it, I think people are going to get hurt and people are going to get upset. And
Right.
I think you just have to be prepared for that. And I think a good parent and a good priest has to be willing to let people walk away.
Yeah. Oh no, I agree with you.
They walked away with something. Like, even though with me and my father, I didn't agree with what he was saying, and he said it actually in a very nice way.
Yeah.
But I took offense.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
So I don't think he could have said it any other way, and I would have taken offense.
Right.
I would have taken offense no matter what.
Well,
unless he capitulated to exactly what I wanted.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, that's it. And I've actually experienced that as well, where I have known that I was going to get into a conversation of this with someone who was radically against, you know, what I was going to say and what the truth is. And so I was prepared. And so I came into it with affective preparation. I was like, I'm going to be so loving. I'm going to cover this thing up with so much sugar that, you know, and it didn't matter. You're right. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Yes. So.
Father, I want to read this. This is a quote from you. A father's wisdom and presence are reassuring and life-giving. Knowing you can always go to your father in difficult times reassures you that everything will be okay, even when your world seems to be falling apart. Regrettably, many people have never experienced this kind of love from a father. Many people today have grown up with emotionally abusive, distant, and less than virtuous fathers. This has led many people to experience great anxieties and fear in life, as well as a tremendous sense of insecurity. Wow, Father. Okay. That took me 20 years of psychiatry to figure out that many of my issues, and I'm not blaming anybody, and I'm not blaming my father, but many of my issues began with that lack of insecurity. And that insecurity was connected also to abuse that I experienced as a kid, not by father or anybody in my family, but by someone in the church. So, which is a common story, unfortunately, among gay men who used to be Catholic, who were raised Catholic.
Yeah, that insecurity is huge. We all need that. We all want that. And when you're wounded from someone that you think you can trust and who's going to be a protector and you look up to, you know, because we can all have different father or male people that we look up to in our life. When that relationship hurts you, it ends up not helping you, but hurting you. The insecurity just goes deeper and deeper. And I see that and I hear that all the time from some of the guys that I talk to about this particular issue. And they were wanting that insecurity so bad and not getting it, but getting the opposite, getting wounded. When they made themselves vulnerable, they got hurt. And that breaks the heart of God. That breaks the heart of God.
And when a young man is finds abuse as a childhood or experiences abuse as a childhood, and then when he becomes a little older and he instinctively is drawn towards some sort of masculine security and affirmation, where does he go?
Right, right, right.
Where
That's
does
right.
he go?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
exactly. And I think a lot of that, you're going to gravitate towards those who share that same situation, or some expression of it, or something related to it. There's going to be a mutual feeding off of each other, giving each other what you think they want and what you yourself want, but you could be doing even further harm to yourself because you're in a sinful relationship. You're acting out in a sinful way, and two wrongs don't make a right, we say. But
yeah.
this is where, on some level, no matter who we are, no matter how wounded we've been, hurt we've been, or by whom we've been hurt, this is again where I think bringing Saint Joseph into all of this is a huge thing, because he is such a good father.
He won't hurt you.
He will never hurt you, never ever hurt you. And to know that, he's got your best intentions at hand, 24/7, always available, always comforting. I mean, some of his titles in the Litany of Saint Joseph:
Yeah.
Comfort of the Afflicted. I mean, that is, I mean, and to know that that's my dad. That's my dad. My dad, and this, yeah, as I'm saying it now, it's my dad is one at the same time. My spiritual dad, at one and the same time, is the comfort of the afflicted and the terror of demons. That's my dad. I mean, I rest in that. I find security in that. I find strength in that. I find an ability to move forward in that and to not be afraid. And that's what I want more people to know. And that's part of the reason, why I put the book together, was to give people that comfort of knowing who we have to be our spiritual father in
Yeah,
St.
and
Joseph.
Father, let's face it, that through no fault of most of their own, the Catholic priesthood has been pretty much effectively, shackled by the sex abuse scandal, because what priest in his right mind would want to mentor a vulnerable young man?
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. This is unfortunate. This is another tactic of the devil.
Yep.
It's to have this exactly happen. Now, I mean, I even hate to say it, a lot of priests are scared to speak the truth.
Yep.
And to minister to the wounded, because they're afraid they're going to get an accusation against them, or something's going to happen. Somebody's going to not like what they say, and the bishop's going to get a report, and then all of a sudden, you're gone.
Yeah.
That's not, we're called to be ministers of salvation and go to the lost sheep and the wounded and the broken. And this is a tactic of the devil, is to get priests scared to even exercise the fullness of their ministry.
Yeah. And Father, what has made this situation even worse is that, okay, you have priests who I think rightly are fearful and cautious about having anything to do with young people, specifically young men, and even they wouldn't even want to deal with any young men who maybe have some sort of sexual issues with orientation and stuff. So what I have seen in parishes is that, again, priests have abdicated this ministry, if you want to call it, to lay people.
Right.
And oftentimes these lay people are themselves from the LGBT community.
Mm-hmm.
And their motives are all over the place.
Correct. That is a big mistake, but more than a mistake is I've seen that play out, and I've read about it. Every now and then you read about some article, or even I've learned about some of them from your posts.
Probably from me, yeah.
Where all of a sudden, the priest doesn't know exactly what to do, and he doesn't want to maybe be involved himself, but then all of a sudden there pops up a pride mass or and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. That's not, what are you doing here? I mean,
Last weekend.
yeah, I mean, it's like, what are you doing? I mean, look, that's not the way to go about it. You're going to be sending a massive mixed message. That is not what you want to do.
No.
And yet, for some reason, I keep seeing it happen. And I'm like, guys, what are you doing? Brothers in the priesthood, why are you doing this? That is not the bridge that should be built. That's the wrong bridge, you know? And you've got to speak the truth with love, but you don't want to lead them into further, struggles and difficulty and confusion. You're not helping them at that point. Your fatherhood is further hurting them.
Exactly. You're abusive.
You're abusive. That's right. Exactly.
Father, listen to this one. So a lady contacted me, and she told me that her son was having problems with sexual orientation, with trying to figure out who he was. She didn't get into his background, where dad was or what he experienced. But whenever there's an issue with the son, it's always the mom that contacts me, which speaks a lot. So she was an immigrant lady, and very, very, as sometimes immigrants are, very trusting, because she came from a Catholic culture, very trusting of the Catholic Church, very trusting of the priesthood, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Right. But so she went to her local parish, talked to the priest. My son is saying he's gay, and I don't know what to do. And the priest said, "Oh, by the way, I have an LGBT Catholic ministry here at the parish." "Oh, okay. I'll send my son there, my underage minor son, to this ministry." So the young man starts going to the meetings, and they have gay pride masses, like you just described. And then a few months later, he emerges from this pit as a very out LGBT activist with a boyfriend.
Right. Yeah. A lot of good that did. Yeah. Right. Well, that's not too uncommon. I hate to say it. It's not too uncommon, because oftentimes, as you said, the priest isn't really doing what he needs to be doing, because it's hard. I mean, even the priest wants to be loved and liked, but in some of these things, you have to be the father. You have to be the one who says, "Not under my roof. This isn't allowed. No, okay. Not because I'm the meanie, because I really love you. I really love you. And ultimately, I want you to be happy forever in a place called heaven." But when they don't want to do it, or even sometimes if they're involved, because sadly, I know there's some priests out there who are actually the heads of these kind of particular groups.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But then, if they're not, then, as you said, sometimes the lay people running it, they don't have the sound theology that's needed to be speaking on these matters. They're speaking more out of emotion and feeling and experience, and that's overriding for them reason and divine revelation. And then they end up with the people that are coming to these kind of groups, kind of giving them an encouragement to come out boldly, and to, now you've got the Catholic Church behind you, because remember, the father allowed this group, and so now be free in the parish to do and say whatever you want. It's a mess.
And I'm not going to ask you to defend these people. Here's another great quote you have. They're all great. "Contraception, pornography, abortion, gender confusion, moral depravity, empty churches, morally corrupt clergy, and cultural chaos are only a few of the fruits of a society that lacks real men and fathers." Wow. Father Calloway, how do you really feel?
Well, that's the facts, Jack. I mean, it goes both ways, right? Because if you think about it, men who are not living up to their vocation are largely responsible for this contraceptive world that we live in. I have to say, now even women are thoroughly into this, and we've so fallen away from these things that so many women are freely participating in these things, of course. But initially, I really don't think it was the women. I think it was the men who just wanted to basically pleasure themselves, whether by themselves or with others, whether a male or a female. And thus contraception is a huge factor in that, and all of these forms of basically just using people for their bodies has crept in. And so if you have that in the guys who are called to be the head of a family or a servant leader, when you have them acting out of that, you do get this world that one thing builds on another, and you get a very filthy, perverse, pornographic, contraceptive, immoral, everything, everything. I mean, it's gotten to the point today, for example, this just comes to my mind right now. I didn't prepare this or anything. But, you know, I turn on the TV sometimes and I'll see a commercial about little girls who are basically being dressed up like prostitutes, paraded around in some ballet contest or whatever, it's some ballerina thing to get a crown. Mom is all for it. She's, you know, I'm like, how could you put, but always in those TV shows, where's the dad?
No.
Where's the dad? I mean, dad should come in and say like, hey, no.
Of course.
My money is not going to this cause. And no, something's off here. But the dads are just absent, completely absent. And here's the odd thing about it too, is I find it so ironic that so many, especially like Hollywood actors, for example, they come out, you know, all the time in commercials and whatever they're speaking at, and they say, it's so wrong that this is happening and this is happening and this is happening. But they don't realize that you're at the root of it. The movies that you're in portray, glorify, you make money off the same thing, and then some guy gets busted for doing it, and you come out as the voice of moral authority on the issue. And it's like, dude, you're at the root of the problem. So it's so odd to me that this happens, that people condemn certain practices, and yet they make money off of it for a living. That's what they do. And a lot of this, not all of it, is because men have abdicated. They're not doing what they should, which is to be protectors of women and children, be defenders, providers, to be the ones who are willing to die for others. We have become so selfish now, and the fruit of that is apparent. We have got a culture run amok, and we're in big trouble. I mean, we need a turnaround in a huge biblical way, in my opinion.
Thank you. Yes. You write this as well. The number one sin among men today is impurity. And here, I think this is the greatest quote in the book. The devil doesn't fear many men today.
Nope. Right. Because they're spiritually impotent.
Wow.
They're spiritually impotent. When you're not pure, you have no power.
Right.
The devil is not worried about you. That's why he's worried about who's the one man after Jesus Christ, of course, that the devil fears the most.
Joseph.
That one right there behind me, you know,
Yep.
Because purity is a sword of power against the filthy pornographic creature that Satan is. And so the devil today is more than happy that I think the most hit on link on the internet is Pornhub. I think the devil very much delights in this because it makes of men, who are the majority of the people hitting that, weak,
far.
Totally weak. You have no power. You have no ability to come up against a dragon. You've laid down your weapon and you're toast. And that's, again, why we've got to get men to turn to St. Joseph, because imagine if every man were a terror of demons.
Wow.
It'd
be a different world. It would be completely different. I mean, I think a lot of the problems going on in the church are definitely connected to the hierarchy and to the priesthood. But I can just imagine if when these priests put the rainbow flag on the altar, or they tell young boys that they were born gay,
right.
And a father stands up and says, "You are not going to tell my son that he was born gay. You're not going to try that here."
Right.
That would put an end to this.
Yep, that's right. Well, exactly. I can tell you right now, if I were a father biologically and that happened, I would do the same thing. You're putting my son's soul in jeopardy by saying this kind of stuff. What are you doing? I'm doing my part, but father, spiritual father, you got to do your part, and you're not doing it. You're doing the opposite. So this is a big problem today, and this is why we need a holy priesthood. We need a renewal in the priesthood, because it's been really wounded, and I don't want to scandalize anybody by saying this, but I mean, you'd have to be living in another cosmos not to be aware of what's happened in the last 40, 50 years or whatever.
Yeah.
It's very sinful and very criminal things. And the church right now, unfortunately, I think it's safe to say as well, has lost her moral authority in the eyes of the world.
Yep.
People don't look to bishops today and think, this man is leading us, you know, and we can follow him. They think that they've committed cover-ups, and oftentimes that has happened. And you know, I mean, it's been everywhere. We've seen it. How do we recover this? As one of my professors in seminary said, the toothpaste is out of the tube. How do you get it back? How do you put it back in? This is why I think we do need something. And I don't want to freak anybody out. I'm not a prophet, but we need something biblical, man. We need something to shake us up.
Exactly.
Call it 3 days of darkness. I don't know, whatever, something. We need something to recalibrate us, because we're lost.
And I think, Father, part of saying the truth, like if a father of a son stood up and said to a priest, "You're not going to say that my son was born gay," that requires suffering to stand up for the truth. And you know this more than anybody. You wrote this. These are two different quotes, but almost on the same page. You wrote, "Saint Joseph's suffering continued for the remainder of his married life." And then you wrote, "No martyr's suffering has been greater than the suffering of Saint Joseph." And I think you know, I relate. You know, I don't mean to be prideful or narcissistic, but I mean, I relate a lot of the things, and I think a lot of people will do this when you read the book, is I relate a lot of these things in my own life. And my father was a pretty intense sufferer. I mean, I would say all of his life, like you wrote here. And the majority of that suffering was connected with his family.
Mm.
Yeah, I wouldn't say particularly me, but especially me. Yeah, and people don't want to suffer. Men don't want to suffer. Nobody wants to suffer. I think they would rather just get along to get along.
Yeah, sure.
If my son brings over the boyfriend, the husband, let's just get along. Let's just keep it quiet.
Right. That's a huge thing. I see that. I hear that with some frequency. Is well, you know, we don't want to rock the boat, and you know, we'll let things happen. We'll let it play out and see, you know, where it goes. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I know that you love your son or your daughter, but that love is going to be expressed in a lot more, even if for a time you have to greatly suffer. And even if they say to your face, and they probably will, "I hate you." They probably will. And that's going to crush you. That is going to cause your heart to be pierced, you know, and you're going to go through so much pain. But you know what? God wants your cooperation in that suffering to give spiritual birth to your child. You gave birth to them once. And, you know, all women tell me it's torturous. You know, you're throwing up, you're vomiting, and when the child is coming through your womb, I mean, I can only imagine. I've had kidney stones. They tell me it's similar, but you know, so it's got to be painful. And imagine the joy, though, when you hold that baby in your arms and the pain is over and you're just smothering that baby with kisses. How wonderful that is. Well, imagine if you're willing to say to your son or your daughter, "Honey, I love you. I will always love you. You're my child. I am here for you always. But of this particular thing, I cannot approve. And it's not pleasing to me or to God. I know you don't want to hear that. I know you probably hate me. And maybe you're not going to talk to me. But honey, I love you. And I want you to know that I'm always here." That's bedrock. Because when that child goes through a crisis, which they will, they'll know where they can go back to, where
exactly,
the truth
Father.
never changes. Where the truth never, it's been waiting for you. Never going to turn away from you. You come back. We're all broken, wounded. but honey, it doesn't change. That's what people need to hear. And it requires the ability, and it's hard to suffer.
If the prodigal son never left, he could never have come back. That sounds so trite. But I mean, that was definitely my story. And I think it was kind of part of your story too, Father.
Yep.
But see, what has happened with the LGBT issue is that they created an environment in which people don't walk away. They have no reason. There's no pushback. There's nothing in the family. There's nothing in the church.
Right.
Because they can find a gay church.
Right. That's right. Yes.
You have the gay community where there's gay restaurants, gay dating sites, gay movie theaters. Hey, I did all this. Gay discos, gay singers, and there's a gay church.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Everything is gay.
Right. Right. I mean, and again, it's being so entrenched now in so many organizations that if you do, express opposition or resistance or an opinion different than theirs, now everybody's concerned about the litigation. I'm going to be sued. I'm going to lose this. I'm going to this, that, and the other. So I find so many good people who actually do know the truth, but they're afraid. And by saying this, I'm referring even to some priests. They know the truth, and yet they're just really worried about these kind of issues of I'll lose my reputation, I'll lose my parish, I'll be sent to a nursing home to do ministry, for the rest of my days. And this is the tragedy: is there's so much fear right now. So many people are living in fear of speaking the truth that the truth doesn't get told.
Exactly.
And that is unfortunate. And that's where we need bold leadership. And again, I can't express it enough. I can't. Yes, with great compassion, great love and understanding. Yes, yes, yes. But you have to say the truth.
I think the church has that. I think it has that. I think it has the love and compassion. I think that's
it
clear.
does. Yeah.
I think it's clear. I don't think any church is as tolerant of people who are homosexual.
Right.
I mean, look at, okay, I won't get into that. Listen to this, folks.
The Holy Spirit saved you there.
What we learn from the sacrificial fatherhood of Saint Joseph is that he is a man who takes care of those entrusted to him, no matter the cost.
Yes, yes.
Well, that's everything you were saying. No matter the cost.
Yeah, and I want to be like that. I mean, that kind of understanding of what a man is, I want that. I want to be a champion. I want to be a hero. I mean, I think all men intrinsically want that. And when I don't live up to that, I know it. And I feel that. And sometimes it requires me to go to confession because I royally jack it up, But I want that. No matter what the cost, I want to be the one who takes the bullet. I want to be the one who saves people. And so, I pray that we get that understanding back. That's what I think it means to be chivalrous. That's what I think it means to be a knight, a warrior. Is, not for me, not for my glory, not for my, I get a prize from it or a trophy. Everybody says he wants a trophy. I want to do it because it's the right thing to do, And I pray that we can recover that. And that's, again, I think that's another reason why we need St. Joseph, because he is the perfect model of exactly that.
Exactly. This is another great quote. When bishops imitate the purity, zeal, and fatherhood of St. Joseph, mankind will once again look to the church as the moral compass of the world.
To me, that's
Father, I'm waiting.
Yeah, I know, brother. I know. And there's many that are. That's why I think we need this renewal. We need this something to happen to the church to shake us up, to wake us up, and to get this stuff back, because we're not going to have the impact on the world that we need to until we have this transformation.
Yeah.
Really. We're in an anthropological crisis right now, brother. In the world.
I think, and I started this conversation with you, I think there's the issue of fatherlessness and the father wound weaving through this whole book. And for men, at least, that's where the healing has to begin and end. That's it. That's it. That's it. It's with Father, and we have such a great foster father in heaven. I know some people, because I have conversations with them, most of them are irreligious people, but trying to figure things out. They say that well, it's like having an imaginary friend, Joe. You've sort of invented the perfect father for yourself.
Mm,
you know
mm, mm.
but he is real. He was a real
Yeah, yeah,
person.
that's right. And if he was good enough to be the father of Jesus, he's certainly good enough to be our father. You know what I mean? So that says all we need to know right there is if God the Father said, hey, I need a man to entrust my son into the care of, to raise him and to
Right.
teach him how to be a man in his human nature. If that man was Joseph, then we don't need to look anywhere else. We just need to go to Joseph. Go to Joseph. That's what that's what the popes have been telling us.
Father, I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but I know, and I don't want to reference myself too much. I think I've already done it too much, but I think, because I'm here and I'm talking to you, I think my story in some ways is representative of a lot of people that I know. I mean, I know that for a fact because they've told me this.
Yeah.
And I've been back to the church for 20 years, but I've been contemplating leaving the church. Probably from that day I walked back into the church.
Yeah.
Because that day I met with a priest, and after our discussion, he wanted to go introduce me to another man that was in his LGBT ministry. That's what's happened. And
Wow.
it's not, and it's just not the issue of abuse that's happened in the church. Because I think a lot of people rightly say, well, that's a very small minority of priests did that. But I think most of the victims were boys and young men. And I think, studies have shown that that's the group that's least likely to report that abuse. I think the numbers are bigger, but it's what's hurt more is the betrayal. That's what hurts more.
Yeah.
And it's a different kind of betrayal. I think why I have such a strong affinity towards Saint Joseph, because I can trust him.
Yeah.
And what many people that have been abused or neglected or whatever, or lied to in the Catholic Church, they have a hard time with trust.
Yeah. True. That's true. Well, I always tell people an analogy. Thousands of years ago, we all know the story about Noah, right? The world was all messed up, and God told one guy, look, here's the deal. Make a boat, put your family in it, put a whole bunch of animals in it,
right,
and get ready. And everybody was probably laughing at him, and trying to make their own boats, maybe, who knows. But what was in that boat? Once the waters raised, the floods came, the rain was so much, and what was in that boat? A lot of animals.
a lot of dirt.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, we could use a lot of words right now. We'll say manure, okay?
Right.
And every now and then you're going to step in it, and it stinks. And if you could jump out of that boat and survive, you'd probably jump out. It was a mess. But if you jump out, you're in trouble. And that's what the Catholic Church is going through right now, because Jesus himself said, in the days of the coming of the Son of Man, it will be like the times of Noah. That's what Jesus says in the New Testament. You have to look up the exact phrasing, but it's there. So
I've kept you too long, Father, but nobody's cleaning it up.
Well, I hear you there. I hear you. But this is where I think we need something kind of event to help us, because it's thick right now. It's so deep, and everybody's stepping in it, and it stinks, and tons of people are jumping ship. If you look at the rates of people who are leaving the Catholic Church, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. They say that the second largest group of Christians are non-Catholics, because there's so many people that are leaving.
Man.
And this is a tragedy. This is not a good thing. They're leaving the sacraments. They're leaving the fullness of the truth. And so even though things are horrible, you know, it is the one ark that Jesus made, and we've got to stay in it. Don't jump ship. You will drown. Don't jump out. But we've got to pray for something.
Well, I was thinking about jumping to another ship that's cleaner, that's better managed.
And what would that be?
I don't know.
You ain't going to find it, brother. You ain't going to find it.
Father, I've kept you too long. I hope your book is a harbinger of things, of things to come, because I think a lot of lay Catholics believe that the issue for the 21st century was the abortion, the life issue, which is extremely important for the Catholic Church. But I think the issue is the identity one, and I think it's the LGBT one, because that's the one that's come home to roost in the Catholic Church. Because there aren't priests and there aren't bishops and there aren't cardinals that have had abortions. But there are priests and there are bishops and there are cardinals that are intimately attached to that LGBT issue. And it will. No, anyway. I also want to recommend this video. Is awesome. The Rosary Spiritual Sword of Our Lady. Totally awesome. Now, my dad was so devoted to the Rosary. He said, let's see. So he said the Rosary, all 4 mysteries, twice a day.
Wow.
So that's like what, 300 Hail Marys? I don't know. It's crazy.
Awesome.
So I know. So that's what saved me from the LGBT life, pornography, Satanism, BDSM, everything nasty that you can imagine. That's what saved me. Because you don't see men walking around with the rosary, holding the rosary, praying the rosary. That's something for the little old ladies to do, But that's a weapon. And the spiritual sword of Our Lady, that's it. Men need to start praying the rosary. Please, please, please. Right, Father?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. That's what Our Lady is asking us to do. So let's do it. Let's do it.
Do you think St. Joseph prayed the rosary or prays the rosary in heaven, that he would have a...
I don't know what they do in heaven, but
that's such a beautiful image to me. But
well, there is a link between the rosary and Joseph, here on earth, is the joyful mysteries, right? So a lot of people always say to me,
those are my favorite.
St. Joseph isn't in the rosary. And I'm like,
sure he is.
He totally is. In the 5 joyful mysteries, those are Joseph mysteries as well. And some people have actually said, well, 4 of them, but not the Annunciation.
Come on.
And I'm like, yes, he does. I'm like, Mary was already married to St. Joseph when the angel came to her. That was Joseph's wife in that mystery. So don't leave him out, So, so those are his mysteries as well.
Yeah, if somebody is a parent that has an LGBT kid that identifies as LGBT, especially if your child is a boy, be devoted to St. Joseph, and then it doesn't matter, boy or girl, pray the rosary for that person. Because I would not be alive here today talking to you, Father, if my dad hadn't prayed the rosary for me day and night. And if he was sick, if he was in the hospital, no matter what he was doing, if he was working, he stopped, said the rosary for me.
Yeah, awesome.
And I had no idea, none idea at all. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Right. Yep. Praise the Lord.
Thank you. God bless you, Father. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joseph, and thanks for all you do to help people who are struggling, with their identity and everything. God be praised for that, brother.
Father, if it wasn't, I'm one of the little guys on the front lines, but if it wasn't for priests like you, who are like the generals, if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be here. There's only a handful of you that I can say I admire and that I love, and I'm proud to call a father. And you're one of them.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, brother, and pray for us. We need it.
Yeah. Could you give me and everybody a blessing real quick?
Absolutely. Yes. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we ask you to pour down your graces and mercies upon Joseph, upon all of the viewers and listeners, that their hearts would be touched with the truth, that they would come to a deeper conversion in their own lives, turning away from sin, turning away from darkness, and turning to the light, and turning to what is good, what is true, and what is beautiful, all through the intercession of Our Lady and the great Saint Joseph. We give this blessing in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father. Thank you.